Tools? Yep. Gloves, goggles, sandwiches? Yep. Let's get on with it then. Here we go.
Where do we start, Nick?
Well, Gary, the leak's behind there, so that lot needs ripping out.
I think we can do that.
Right, Gary, see you in the morning.
7:30, yeah?
Yeah. And that doesn't mean 7:30 Gary time, okay?
Okay.
Mum?
How are you?
Oh, you know, the usual. Hard work, dirty, messy.
Thanks for coming.
Sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. I had an emergency.
How are you?
I'm all right.
It's a bit nippy out there.
Doesn't bother me.
His sleeping's getting worse.
You are still taking the pills?
I make sure of that. He just can't seem to get comfortable, you know.
Not finished it yet then, Nick?
Well, I'm getting there.
Oh, well, keep up the good work.
Do you want to come through?
Oh, yeah. Just going outside to talk about you.
Makes a change, that, doesn't it?
Sounds worse. Is it?
Difficult to tell, you know, when you live with it every day.
I could give you another prescription.
You wouldn't take it. And even if you did, it's not going to do any good, is it?
Not really.
Mrs. Williams came in yesterday.
Oh?
3 doors down. Well, most of them have been in, actually. Becoming quite a celebrity. I mean, it's not every mother who's got a son slowly dying in the front room.
So, she's a friend?
Mrs. Williams, sort of. Telling me about her brother. He'd been working with asbestos, you know, off and on. Killed him in the end. Some coincidence, eh?
There is no cure, as I told you last week. It's not the sort of thing you want to hear from your doctor, I know, but...
I've known about his condition for what, 2 months? And then last week you tell me it's probably asbestos related. But I still don't really understand. There was all that fuss a few years ago about the people making asbestos products. The workers and all the ones who died. Nick was a builder. Plumbing, painting, that's what he did. Well, of course I'm going to say I don't think it's fair, aren't I? But, well, I don't think it is fair.
In my last practice, we had quite a few patients who used to work for a company making insulating materials out of asbestos. And several of them contracted either lung cancer or mesothelioma. In most cases, it took 30 years or longer to show itself. But some of my partners also had patients like Nick, general builders, carpenters, electricians, who'd ended up with the same diseases. And in one case, the disease showed itself much earlier. Same as Nick.
So you're saying Nick was unlucky? I think that's a bit of an understatement.
But it's a question of exposure. The more exposure you have, the more chance you have of being unlucky. Asbestos is fairly harmless if you leave it alone. Once you disturb it, release the fibres, and then breathe those fibres in.
But not 8 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Maybe, but the fibres are very long-lasting. Once they get to the lung tissue, they can't be dissolved or broken down over time. So the problem is cumulative, More so if the worker's a smoker. An electrician goes on the job, breaks through some ceiling tiles containing asbestos, breathes the fibres in. The next job he goes on, he has to chase some cable into a wall. The wall covering also contains asbestos. More fibres breathed in. So the problem just keeps on building up.
You can't be sure, though. I mean about Nick.
I can't be certain, but as I say, I've come across lots of similar cases. And when Nick first went into hospital, he told them that he was always working on different kinds of materials.
He was always so careful at work.
I'm sure he was. The thing is, he may not have known he was working with asbestos. Although most of it's been banned for years, it's still everywhere. Thousands of tons of it. Floor tiles, ceiling tiles, rope, gaskets, sprayed coatings, cement, insulating board, plaster. Some materials are worse than others, but if you don't know, you can't tell. It's in factories, schools, farm buildings, hospitals, shops, office buildings, public libraries. It's even in people's homes. Everywhere.
I don't know.
Mum! What's the bloke have to do? To get a cup of tea round here, eh?
You'll be pleased to see you.
How are things? About the same?
No, not really.
How are you today? I saw Bill and Terry. They asked me to pass on their best wishes to you, you know. Nick? Bill and Terry send their best. So how are things?
Don't take it personally. They give him less than a month.
What?
I just wish it was sooner.
I had no idea. So fast.
Towards the end it is. They told me that.
What about the oxygen?
24 hours a day. The machine's running flat out. This is the only kind of sleep he gets. He's on morphine now. That helps. Oh, something I forgot to ask you last time. Whatever happened to Gary? Nick was talking about him the other day.
He moved on a few years ago. I tried to keep him, but you know how it is. I could try and track him down for you if you like.
I think he'd like that. How's the business?
Same as usual. Good times, bad times. Gwen, I really don't know what to say about all of this.
Nothing to say. Wasn't your fault.
Maybe. I do tell him, you know. I tell all of my blokes. Health and safety is important. I send them on training courses. I give them booklets to read, safety videos to take home, and I provide them with all the right equipment. Then, of course, they go out on a job, someone else's premises. There's the site manager pacing up and down, giving his watch orders. The job's running behind, his boss is getting at him. I only wish.
Wish what?
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. I wish my blokes wouldn't let all of that get in the way. Stop them taking the proper care, checking everything out first. The people responsible for the buildings I send my blokes into, the managers, you know. Well, for years they've had a legal duty to identify asbestos, and if it's damaged, get it repaired or removed by licensed experts. Or if they decide to leave it where it is, make sure the risks are properly managed. But does that happen on every job?
But Nick did know the dangers. You did tell him. I mean, I thought the problem was not always being able to recognize the stuff that contained asbestos.
Nick was Nick's one of the best blokes I've ever had. Careful. He never had any accidents and didn't cause any either. If I'd known he was coming across asbestos on the job, I'd have done something about it, warned him, you know. I mean, I know there are safe ways of working with the stuff. Not disturbing it with high-speed power tools, making sure you keep it wet, cleaning up as you go and bagging up the debris properly, but he cared about the firm. He didn't want to let me down, so if he was under pressure, he'd just get on with it. Maybe he didn't always make sure. You know, is this power drill safe to use? Is this ladder secure? Is this material I'm about to smash into likely to contain asbestos?
I haven't offered you a drink.
No, it's all right, Gwen, I'm fine. Look, I'm sorry for talking like that.
No need to be. Could you give me a hand? Need the bathroom? Alan, good to see you. Steady. How are you?
Okay, thanks.
Doncaster, eh?
I met this girl. We're married now. I was getting fed up with the building game. She wanted to move back to her hometown. You know,
So what are you doing now?
managing a DIY store. It's not bad. At least it helps knowing the difference between a hammer and a screwdriver.
It was good of you to come, Gary.
I just wish I'd known.
How could you? Remember this. Keep it if you want.
My 18th. Went to the pub after work and Nick...
It's okay. He would love to have seen you, but he wouldn't have known who you were. The last few weeks he was on so much morphine he didn't know who anybody was. He couldn't walk, talk. He couldn't do anything. Except die, and I'm glad it's over.
When Alan found me, he told me that Nick was sick and why, I started thinking. We'd all heard about the risks of working with stuff containing asbestos. But we didn't think about it. Even if we had. It's the old thing, isn't it? You never believe it's going to happen to you.
I don't think Nick would have agreed with that.
About 6 weeks before I left, Nick and I were working on this job and somebody, not one of our blokes, fell off some dodgy scaffolding. Killed him.
I remember Nick saying, it was a big fuss, wasn't that?
Yeah. The scaffold wasn't put up right. The bloke shouldn't have been on it anyway. Next day, though, everybody was walking around quietly, checking every little thing, making sure they did everything by the book. It affected us. You know, one minute there's a bloke there alive, next he's dead. You learn from it. But this thing with Nick, though, something that takes 20 or 30 years to show itself. I don't know how people can learn from that.
I'll make us a coffee, shall I?
Yes, please. Sorry, pal. Thanks.
Tools? Yep. Gloves, goggles, sandwiches? Yep. Let's get on with it then. What do you reckon that stuff is?
What?
Well, supposing that's asbestos. Or there's asbestos in it, or behind it.
Supposing there isn't.
And we'll all live to a ripe old age, won't we? Tell you what, grab a sandwich. I'm going to go and find the foreman. Right, Gary, see you in the morning.
7:30, yeah?
Yeah. And that doesn't mean 7:30 Gary time, okay?
Okay.
Mum?
How are you?
Oh, you know, the usual, hard work, dirty, messy.
Hope you took care of yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Where do we start, Nick?
Well, Gary, the leak's behind there, so that lot needs ripping out.
I think we can do that.
There is no cure, as I told you last week.
But I still don't really understand. There was all that fuss a few years ago about the people making asbestos products. The workers and all the ones who died. Nick was a builder. Plumbing, painting, that's what he did. Would you give me a hand? Need the bathroom? Alan, good to see you.
If you've already seen the first program, you'll know that thousands of workers, just like Nick, die every year because without realizing it, they've worked with materials containing asbestos. As building managers, it may not be your job to train people in how to work safely with asbestos-containing materials, known as ACMs, but it is your job, your duty in fact, to carry out a proper assessment of your premises, identify any asbestos, and then make arrangements which adequately protect the people you employ and the people visiting and working on your premises. In this program, we're going to give you some advice on how to go about doing that. Let's start by being clear about what asbestos is and exactly why breathing in asbestos fibers is so deadly.
The fibers are very long-lasting. Once they get to the lung tissue, they can't be dissolved or broken down over time. So the problem is cumulative, more so if the worker's a smoker. An electrician goes on the job, breaks through some ceiling tiles containing asbestos, breathes the fibers in. The next job he goes on, he has to chase some cable into a wall. The wall covering also contains asbestos. More fibers breathed in. So the problem just keeps on building up.
Asbestos, in its blue and brown forms, was widely used right up until the late 70s. Now, there were concerns about the health risks. Asbestosis, for example, was first discovered some 70 years earlier. But only in 1999 was asbestos in all its forms banned. However,
It's still everywhere. Thousands of tons of it. Floor tiles, ceiling tiles, rope, gaskets, sprayed coatings, cement, insulating board, plaster. Some materials are worse than others, but if you don't know, you can't tell. It's in factories, schools, farm buildings, hospitals, shops, office buildings, public libraries. It's even in people's homes. Everywhere.
and that, of course, is our problem. What do we do about it? Well, the law is pretty clear. The Control of Asbestos at Work regulations were first issued in 1987 and aimed mainly at people working with asbestos. But in 1998, they were amended to include anyone who might come in contact with the material. It is these regulations that will require identification of any ACMs and adequate arrangements to remove, repair or control work on or near them. Let's look at identification. If you do have asbestos on your premises, it's not going to give itself up. You have to go out and find it. Referring to existing building plans or drawings may help. Bear in mind that buildings built between 1900 and 1985 are more likely to contain asbestos, particularly insulation and fireproofing materials in sheet form, lagging or sprayed coatings. But it could be anywhere. So if there are no plans, drawings or other records, you'll have to make records of your own. You can start with a visual inspection. Just walk round and note everything that might be an ACM. The visual inspection must be thorough. It must include any outbuildings and external pipework. It must also include fixed plant and machinery. The results should be clearly marked and formally recorded. You don't need an art degree to be able to produce a plan, just so long as it's accurate and the information clear enough for other people to understand. Okay, now you've got a good idea where asbestos materials are on your premises. The next thing is to quantify the risks to health. If the asbestos is labelled, people are unlikely to work on it without the necessary protection. So, a low risk. Quite different, though, with unlabelled ACMs, since people probably won't recognize them for what they are. Remember that asbestos in good condition, that means undamaged and or sealed to prevent the escape of fibers, represents a minimal health risk. In fact, removal, even by the experts, will probably create much greater risks to health. Of course, asbestos in poor condition is a different story. The risks will be higher if accessible ACMs are present in heavily used, highly populated area like a large office. If ACMs are present in unoccupied or inaccessible areas, obviously the risks will be lower. When it comes to assessing the risks, and bearing in mind the 1987 regulations, there are two crucial areas of concern. Firstly, you must be able to satisfy yourself that no one will be exposed to dust from asbestos while they are on your premises. Secondly, that no one works on any asbestos-containing materials unless they know what it is and unless the arrangements required by the regulations have been put in place. Now, of course, the $64,000 question. How? Well, let's consider some options. You could just take the bull by the horns, call in the experts for a full survey, and then, if necessary, get HSE licensed contractors in to remove the asbestos. This would remove the problem, but it could be very expensive. You could go the other way. Assume that all the materials on your premises contain asbestos and leave them exactly where they are. This would mean you having to make sure that no one does any work involving cutting, drilling, sanding, or any other type of work likely to disturb the material. The person responsible for the premises must satisfy themselves that all ACMs have been identified and that the safe working arrangements required by the regulations are in place. If you haven't carried out a proper survey, the contractors will have to carry out their own, which you'll end up paying for anyway. You'd also have to put in place a maintenance program to ensure that any damage to any of the materials on any part of the premises is identified and repaired immediately, in case the damaged material happens to be an ACM. In the long run, this option could also prove to be very expensive. A third option might be a halfway house. Any asbestos in good condition or otherwise that can be kept away from people may be left where it is. Then decide which parts of your premises might require a specialist survey and risk assessment so that you're sure that all ACMs have been identified and clearly labelled. You will need specialist help if any sealing off or removal is necessary. As an employer in control of the premises, the bottom line is you've got to do something. And whatever you decide to do, it must be backed up by an effective management system. That system must include written information as to the precise location and condition of any identified ACMs. I mentioned earlier that as a building manager, you may not be responsible for training people in the procedures required by the regulations, but you are responsible for making sure that those procedures are in place and effective. Accidents and ill health often result from something changing, an unexpected problem, or a change of task which moves the job outside the scope of the existing arrangements for health and safety. When it comes to building work, change is almost a routine. Monitoring the work and reviewing the arrangements is therefore a crucial part of any management system. Asbestos can and must be handled properly. No one is going to willingly endanger themselves because most workers know that disturbing a material containing asbestos has the potential to kill. But if they don't know it's asbestos, well, that's the whole point, isn't it? Asbestos has been termed the dominant cause of occupational ill health in the second half of the 20th century. Past exposures to the material are responsible for between 2,000 and 3,000 people dying from asbestos-related cancers every year. In most cases, the diseases take 20 to 30 years or longer to develop. In all cases, the result is a painful death. So what are the chances of there being asbestos material on your premises? Well, let's put it this way. In the 1960s and throughout the 1970s, asbestos imports ran at about 150,000 tons every year. So I'd say there was a pretty good chance you've got a problem you'll have to deal with.
There is no cure, as I told you last week.
Nick was a builder. Plumbing, painting, that's what he did. Could you give me a hand? Need the bathroom? Alan, good to see you.
There is no cure, as I told you last week.
I've known about his condition for what, 2 months? And then last week you tell me it's probably asbestos related. But I still don't really understand.
In my last practice, we had quite a few patients who used to work for a company making insulating materials out of asbestos. And several of them contracted either lung cancer or mesothelioma. In most cases, it took 30 years or longer to show itself. But some of my partners also had patients like Nick, general builders, carpenters, electricians, who'd ended up with the same diseases. And in one case, the disease showed itself much earlier. Same as Nick.
He was always so careful at work.
I'm sure he was. The thing is, he may not have known he was working with asbestos. Although most of it's been banned for years, it's still everywhere. Thousands of tons of it. Floor tiles, ceiling tiles, rope, gaskets, sprayed coatings, cement, insulating board, plaster. Some materials are worse than others, but if you don't know, you can't tell. It's in factories, schools, farm buildings, hospitals, shops, office buildings, public libraries. It's even in people's homes. Everywhere.
I don't know.
Mum! What's the bloke have to do? To get a cup of tea round here, eh?
He'll be pleased to see you.
How are things? About the same?
No, not really. They give him less than a month.
What?
I just wish it was sooner.
I had no idea. So fast.
Towards the end it is. They told me that. I haven't offered you a drink.
It's all right, Grandma.
Would you give me a hand? Need the bathroom? Alan's come to see you. It's good of you to come, Gary.
Just wish I'd known.
We would love to have seen you, but we wouldn't have known who you were. The last few weeks he was on so much morphine he didn't know who anybody was. He couldn't walk, talk. He couldn't do anything. Except die, and I'm glad it's over.